Saturday spent mainly recovering, and I've been investing a lot of time into Shadow Raid. But beyond that, the Austrian attack. We got a core attack stoppage on the first core. Now, these are the guys who are doing the best job, which is leading me to consider calling off the second core attack, run Charles down, stop the sixth core attack, fall back, and hope for the best up here, because, you know, even if this collapses, there's sort of nothing to protect the line. You know, the Austrian line up here has gotten significantly weakened by me pushing forward. I don't know how much effect that has, because the attack that the French are making is landing on the actual troops there. It's not doing something to bypass, and you know, I don't have orders to do so, and try to slip into this location. But I think the second corps is failing pretty heavily, so I think I'm gonna call that attack off. I have to check the rules, make sure I can, but I believe I can. The new system seems to allow you to just sort of, yeah, you know, it's close to the wording of the old system. It just feels like a different bent to me. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, the Corps commander has seen, I've gotten nothing forward, I'm getting slaughtered, and really can't hold the ground any longer, is my feel. Of reasons for this feeling of there being a difference. Some of the wording is the same, but it's in a different location. So here, no, I guess not. It's not under attack stoppage in either case. It's under this emergency withdrawal. Here it starts out, a command can, regardless of its order's status, execute an emergency withdrawal, therefore canceling the orders and causing it to fall back. But then it follows it, the command must be under a threat of being decimated or destroyed, or due to being under heavy attack, about to be surrounded, or attacking into a murderous fire. Well, I feel like I'm attacking into murderous fire. This is all so fuzzy, right? You know, must be something that's completely subjective. Over here, they had, without orders or initiative, any corps or wing formation may execute an emergency retreat. Formation must be under threat of being surrounded or destroyed, or a command might have an emergency retreat forced on it. The judgment is in the hands of the owning player. You know, I guess it's about as heavy a thing, and there is a definite penalty to it. You know, you take those stragglers, etc., for pushing it. The problem I have with it is it just feels like such an automatic. You know, you're never going to see certain kinds of situations happen that are particularly ugly, that sometimes you do see, where it's like, oh my God, they're going to get slaughtered there. You know, oh well, I guess I got to keep going. I've got orders for that. There was something else. Oh yeah, the way default defense is, which is basically you can throw away your orders at any time and just go into a defend in place as well, which again allows you to stop pursuing bad orders. Now, that's with even less pain than the emergency withdrawal. I feel like the withdrawal is the real requirement here, because I want to fall back to a line back here. The problem with emergency withdrawal, though, is you end up with no orders, which is different in 3.0 than it was in prior versions. In prior versions, no orders meant you were in a default defensive position, except when playing with the defensive orders rules. All right. Yeah, I gotta do it. So I'll put another marker out there and take care of that. And I don't know why I'm babbling. It's not a pretty disengagement. It's going pretty badly for the Austrians. I had the headquarters kind of back. It which means they run even further back. So I'm losing Aspern here, basically. It's not gone completely. 6th Corps has some presence in there, but it does mean that the French could launch an attack into Aspern, probably succeed in taking it, even with that weakened 4th Corps, if and when they wish to. They might hold off, but the abandonment of 1st Corps, back to here, because we got to stretch back to the headquarters to be within range. And the range is 8 hexes. I had said 6 before. I moved my cav to the absolute extent of where it can be, over on that left flank. Some of the units, disordered units and whatnot, they're not even able to get out of being adjacent to the enemy, which means that they don't recover. The routed units mostly didn't recover. Charles is going to give orders to his army, move that back a little bit, and then take off and head down to talk to Hiller about what the hell to do at this point, which might well be shifting over and trying to cover that space that the 2nd Corps was holding. Some of the 2nd Corps sitting over here. What the hell are they doing there? Ooh, they're allowed to be there. But it looks like they forgot to join the attack. But yeah, with 2nd Corps back here, it's going to be kind of hard to defend that range. And I think, this Austrian attack basically lost the game. Unless something magical happens up here or something. There are no more Austrian reinforcements. There's some French, but they aren't going to count for much. And just our holding of Aspern has pretty much disintegrated. And I don't know what to do about it. Play a few more turns out, but this may be a battle that's just over, in the sense that the Austrians won't have enough left in them to attack, and the French may do the wise thing, which they should have done earlier, which is, screw it, man, we will sit on the victory we have, because it means we can bring forces across the river. We don't have to win, a river crossing and then also win a major battle in that case. It's just enough to have succeeded in making the crossing effectively enough. And I felt like what I was in was not quite effective enough without Aspern. But if I gain Aspern, I've got Gross Enzersdorf, and then whatever's happening up here will be interesting additions that allow me to just start channeling more and more French troops through as they arrive, and create a real threat on the other side of the Danube. One of the things I wanted to bring up was we really saw the danger of bringing your artillery right behind your close attacks, unlimbering it. Well, that's a big part of why I can't get out of there, is that, they have only half movement, and it costs them 3 movement points to limber, so that they can withdraw. Yeah, they're facing in the right direction. The infantry is in just as bad a situation, though, in terms of, they only have 7 movement points. They can only spend half, 3.5. It costs them that to change facing, essentially, to run away. So that's why we have this guy stuck here. This guy was able to slip out a little easier. He only spent 2 on change of facing, so, yeah. All right. I think I'm just doing this for now, because a lot of reasons. Now the bloodletting begins. The entirety of 2nd and 3rd Corps pretty much smashing 1-to-1 that Austrian line. I think the French have the advantage overall. There was a little bit of fun around the corner here. One unit was about to advance, got cav charged, frozen, blocked in square, great. But it didn't stop the overall attack. The other unit that had been back here in square converted over, tried to get around. It also got cav intercepted. It got pretty much wiped out by the cav. You know, the first one was a bounce. The second one was, although the cav got wrecked by it, was just a butchery. You know, like a whole unit worth of boxes gone all at once, basically. You know, a really, really intense effects to the cav charges, and to tell you the truth, to the melee, the melee can get very, very powerful as well. So this could pretty much be the end of the battle. As I said, the game, I feel, has already been lost by the Austrians, but this could end up being the end of the battle here, depending on how, you know, if one side or the other just gets really horrendous rolls. Now, I was marching up against a lot of artillery, but a lot of it was kind of spread out. So not a hell of a lot of casualties off of it, maybe 5 coming in on the whole attack. You know, if those were all solid big artillery pieces, you don't want to attack that kind of shit. Your units just take too much damage coming in, and they're not, you know, they're not going to have the size to force the enemy to make their morale check first, which is kind of the key thing, is make the enemy make their morale check first. That way, if they're going to fail, you win, you know? Because if you make your morale check first, well, you might fail instead. But those are pretty solid Austrian units. They're probably not going to fail, so this is probably going to be pretty inconclusive, to tell you the truth. It's probably going to be a lot of firefights with a few key elements to it, but we'll see what comes out of it. Just to give you an idea of what the kind of numbers are, so this is an A unit. It has no chance of breaking on its own. However, it has a skirmisher disadvantage, so it has a 1 in 6 chance. This is a B unit. It has a 1 in 6 chance of breaking. You really want to force the enemy to make that roll first, you know? Even if it's not very likely, it's just every now and then you save yourself any chance. This one turns out to be a firefight. The worse the morale of the units, all the more so you want to force the enemy to make the roll first, which, you know, means there's, so, I mean, if it's a 4 or 5 out of 6 chance of breaking, what that means is, you know, more than 50% of the time, you're going to see them run. It doesn't matter what quality you are. Sort of the opposite of the village situation, where attacking into a village, you need high quality. It doesn't matter what the defender is. Well, if you're attacking shitty troops, it doesn't matter what you are. You're going in as long as you maintain the advantage. Now, the advantage is often terrain generated, but in a flat field like this, there isn't one. So what it comes down to is, who's the biggest? The bigger guy doesn't have to check. Well, they check second. Ugly point where the counter mix for Aspern Essling is not enough to handle this big an individual fight. There is probably a little bit of impact of the version 3.0 rules, but I just don't have enough morale markers, the shaken, disordered markers. Now, I have a bunch of options here. I own a lot of games in the series. I actually have some sorted I could pull back out from Talavera and use those. Or I have some handmade ones, well, not handmade, but some print and play ones that are from the scenarios like Montebello that I played that I could also use. Those involve me digging into a bag or whatever. Instead, what I'm going to do is, for shaken markers, I'm just going to start putting some white markers on the board to represent them. This is going to be a very temporary situation, although not just the length of this turn. So, you know, given the way I walk away, it could cause some problems. But the units of the reserve corps, these are second corps, and I don't know why they're there, but whatever, they got hit. You know, sometimes weird shit happens that the system won't handle, but actually kind of mirrors reality better than a system would, which is like a unit falls out of command. Well, somebody locally made a decision that I didn't really try to make, because I'd be trying to follow the rules. For the most part, those Austrian units of the reserve are big. Actually, all of them are. Like double A's, which most of the French units aren't. Most of the French units are ABs. What that meant is that I had to check first in all these cases. Now, I got one that I got really lucky on and busted this unit through. Otherwise, I've been repulsed, firefights. Damn screw up like I had with the Brickyard, where I didn't see where the town was. When you got a lot of forces on the board, it's hard to tell in this game. And it didn't end up making a difference because the Austrians failed their morale check before I noticed. But yeah, the French had to check first. The Austrians actually I had the Austrians check first. Oh well. I don't want to reverse it. It was a tiny unit, just due to melt away. And the reason they were hiding in the town was because they were so weak. Yeah, pretty inconclusive and pretty fucking bloody. Oh boy. Repulsed around here around the corner, but the advanced guard is disorganized. Most of the rest of the Austrian line is in, fairly steady shape, but you can see these whites here. Those are French units that broke through the line and busted holes in it, causing routes to go back. So it's this weird kind of situation where the Austrians now have an opportunity to come back at the French during their turn. And in some cases where we've broken through the line, we've exposed a rear in the hopes that we would get some successes further on, where really back here we got no more successes. We got repulsed in all cases. The question is, were any of them losses? One of them was the attack against here. Otherwise, they were all just, firefights. The French fall back. But what it means is that the Austrians can kind of do a little bit, well, they really can't. Like if I turn here, I take a morale loss for trying to move in and attacking from one zone into another space. So there is some protection here. You're not going to see some sort of wild cav melee like you see in like the musket and pike games and whatnot, where there's like this swirling death going on. It's not that kind of situation, because if the Austrians turn and try to enter, they become disorganized and then they just suck, right? So yeah, and wherever you see disorganized units, and I've got them facing properly, right? So these are French, this is an Austrian. Wherever you see those are serious weaknesses in the line that they're not really able to attack, and they're not able to fire, and they're just asking to be hit again. They could still win if they're a big force, just by the attacker being too low a morale or whatever. But they're really got big targets on them where that's the case. So, for example, here I could march straight into here because I'm not faced with that morale issue. And if you do things right, you can kind of pin down a lot of units by making attacks elsewhere. So we'll see if the Austrians can slip their way in there, but I think they're not going to be able to get any really seriously advantaged attacks, except like here where we're facing a unit that is not really capable of standing up to the fight. I got to take a break mid-turn because I'm out of tea. That's going to put me at the non-phasing fire phase, actually. I don't think that there's any fire that, well, no, there is. Because this guy, for example, did opportunity fire, but now he's going to get a shot at the units that fell back. So we got a couple of shots coming out, and it's going to take a while to hunt those down. And then after that, whatever recovery there is, but there isn't going to be much because version 3 says those shakens don't go away. So all those shakens, all those temporary shakens, the little white markers I have, they're only on French units. I almost ran out of routed as well. Well, I did, but I cheated somehow. How did I cheat? Oh yeah, here. That was my cheat. So yeah, I mean, the counter mix is not sufficient. Now I remember this being the case, and it may not have only been with this one. It certainly was. Some of the games in the series are fine, but I think that this one and Marengo kind of ran close in terms of you could engage broadly, and if that happened, you ran out of counter mix. All right. Anyway, I gotta brew some more tea and come back here fairly soon before I forget what the hell I'm doing. The thing I want to point out is here I could have launched some attacks across the dike. Now that would have given the defensive benefit to the Austrians, but they're also like showing their rear because they've got to do that retreat. That might have worked out okay. Legally, I feel like I kind of held back from doing it in part because I don't have advance orders, but you've got to be able to allow a counterattack like that on the defense. And I can make arguments one way or another whether or not I made a mistake by not launching. Really, it would have really just been an attack here. And I wouldn't have to go over the dike. I could have brought this unit here and attacked, which probably would have been okay, and dealt some sort of pursuit type losses. On the other hand, my order, well, actually, no, this is the guard unit that just moved up. But this unit could have done it. On the other hand, my orders were kind of to hold the dike, surging over it. There'd be no risk to it, but it just kind of feels funny to me. So I think I made an error by not launching those attacks. I'm not going to go back and try to fix it. I don't do that kind of thing. But, I mean, I didn't have to go across. It's not like it was a rules error. But part of me is just on this kind of, I shouldn't be charging out. Because if you allow stuff like that, you've got kind of this, I don't know, this mentality of, well, it shouldn't really be 100% in my control, should it? I don't know. It's the kind of thing where I like games like Hastings or less so the Musket and Pike series, where, you know, you're just not allowed to do the things that you're not allowed to do, or you must do things that that you're taunted on or whatever. These armies, though, are more well-trained and more regimented in the sense that they might not charge forward and follow up. Although, same basic system is in play in the Civil War Brigade series, and there sure the hell were cases where units took off without their commanders, like, really ordering them to, on a pursuit or something. So, I don't know. It's not going to be as painful as I thought. I knew something was wrong here. Close combat comes after the non-phasing fire phase. So by forcing them to use their op fire, you take away when you engage in close combat, not otherwise. So you got to be careful. I mean, you know, you get these weird little, you get like an opportunity fire and then a non-phasing fire if you move up kind of close to the enemy. On the other hand, when you charge the enemy, all you're facing is the opportunity fire. What you don't want to do is what you tend to do in the CWB series, which is move up close to the enemy in order to trade shots with them. Because in this, the opportunity fire catches you as you're coming close, and then you face it once again at close range. So you want to be at a distance and then launch your wave of attacks like I did on one section here. Over here I got a little too close and, you know, took 1-point shots, which are not good because they can cause actual casualties, as opposed to, oh look, you know, you're on the less than one table, the best you can do is kind of hit me with a morale hit that isn't going to impact me because I'll recover from it during my turn. Of course, you're also going to stand there during their own turn and take another shot at the minus morale. You know what I forgot to do? I forgot to check for ammo depletions. Okay, so 4th Corps got one. Let us hope. 3rd Corps did not shoot, but 2nd did. So let me make a check on that. All right, that one's safe. Rolled off board because if I got a 6, I might have lied. I hadn't made my mind up yet. I wouldn't actually lie. I'd say, oh, shit. Well, I'm not going to fix it. But, and I probably would have tried to at least, I would have at least marked it. Because they really didn't do a lot of firing. It was a little bit of skirmisher fire, I think, at the end of the last French turn. And there might have been a gun that fired as well. All right. Time to deal with the mess now and how to clean up from it, which I'm not really looking forward to. I think that's it for the noon turn. Notice, some of these rallied. It's not adjacency that impacts you. It's zone of influence, which means, I forgot all about the existence of this thing, but it's the thing that generates the potential problems, right? If the Austrians turn and move, I'm not convinced that zone of influence would affect them in that kind of case. Like if they hit one of these French units in the ass. It's going to take some thinking and looking. Right now, I'm feeling kind of weak. It's weird. Everything tires me out so much now because I've done so little, or else it's the long COVID coming back and hitting me again, and I can't tell. I'm going with inactivity, but I don't remember ever being this easily fatigued by anything. I was never this fat either, though. Here I am in the dark depths of the early morning, and oh God, what a mess. All right, so I'm partway through the Austrian movement phase, and I came to the zone of influence problem. We've got 2nd Corps beginning to form up here, extending that little bit of line that I had left behind since it was there. And it was legally there. It just didn't follow order. It didn't follow the orders particularly. 6th Corps actually has orders that allow them to move into Aspern. I was careful because I knew 1st Corps was ready to fall apart if it had been attacked. Although it doesn't really matter because of the villages, the fact that it was pretty beaten up. But, so we've shortened our line and pushed up there. That takes, some sweat off of 4th Corps. And 4th Corps probably doesn't want to attack because they got a low ammo roll. So they want to wait until the bridge is restored, and who knows if and when that can be. So Aspern's probably safe. Things are not as bleak as they looked for the Austrians, although, they were losing and now they're under further attack. Over here, I'm beginning to launch some attacks. I get to the zone of influence rules, and what I find is morale degradation. You lose a level of morale when you move from one enemy zone of influence to another. Moving directly from one enemy zone to another changes formation in a zone, or retreats from one zone of influence directly into another. Not changing facing. And here's a key point. Zones of influence do not extend into hexes with friendly units. They're only in empty hexes. So what it prevents you from doing is like demonstrating in front of, right in front of the enemy line where fire could be happening, some sporadic fire, even without skirmishers deployed. That means that my Austrians can shift and launch attacks if they so desire. If they so desire is a big issue here, because unless I'm leaving line extensions behind, and then of course I'm too weak to really launch my attack, I got some kind of problems, in terms of like, well, I still got a unit in front of me. So ignoring the unit in front of me, turning and trying to smash this unit, it might be a good tactic. It's a little more chaotic than I like. So I can do hand-wavy explanations as to like why musket and pike cav battles, and some other games as well, but in musket and pike I really noticed it turn into this swirl of confusion. Great battles of history it does too, where everybody's trying to get hits on each other's flanks and everything's moving around, and you can kind of say, well, a cav battle really did descend into this whirling maelstrom. So okay, I have a lot more trouble making that kind of argument in a case like this, because there's no engaged situation like there is in GBOH or whatever, and there shouldn't be. You're not really engaged if you're at 1 hex distance, and you get flung out when you go into the same hex. So I would absolutely be able to do that, but it would be abandoning my guns. If that turns out to be the wise maneuver in terms of like, oh, well, that would be cute, or even an acceptable maneuver, and I think it does, at least the latter, oh boy, does it, it doesn't feel right. In the way much of this system does, it doesn't feel right to be able to turn, march away from the enemy, and abandon your guns, or just expose your flank or whatever, although you could reorganize if you win the battle, or if you lose it. So, no matter what, you can reface after a melee. So, geez, I don't know. I am going to do a couple of those rear attacks that I'm really iffy about. Mainly because exposing an artillery is not that bad. It gets a shot at you, then it rolls on the gun loss table. And, that may be about as good as I can expect anyhow, since I'd be flank attacked, not rear, so there's no penalty, but still. And that's a kind of interesting thing. There's no penalty for flank attack, I think. Let me make sure I'm correct about that. I know there is a -2 from attacked in the rear. Yeah, nothing in the flank, and no penalty for a square being attacked. The idea being that the formation can respond to these events reasonably well. Whereas if you're attacked in the rear, you're actually probably getting hit in the flank. I mean, it might be possible you're hit directly in the rear, but... So, yeah, just the way that the units sit in the hex says it kind of makes sense. If you see this, it's kind of coming in at a diagonal, hitting towards the corner of the rear corner of the unit. And you would think there'd be a little bit of distortion of the line to protect it. So it works out as a flank, I'm sure. And likewise, a square would be able to... the turns are a half hour each, would be able to form up into something less distributed in order to defend itself. So I'm not going to hit the square. That doesn't seem like a wise choice. I don't have any attacks down here, and I'm trying to remember why. Is this an extension? Yeah, so one of the biggest problems I have is I have an extension here. So I can't move this in to attack here without moving this, and then that would be subject to the same problem. Now, this is in that hex. It's a little blurry because it's kind of sitting between the hexes. But it means I couldn't just like wheel the unit into 2 hexes or something along those lines, which I could if it was actually in front of me. So there's going to be some distortion, some problems in terms of I'm not going to get as effective a set of attacks as I would have liked, mainly because this is not 2 units, it's 1. And there's a big danger that the Austrians are going to have a set of units kind of pocketed. Now, it's not like in an operational game where being pocketed is a terrible, terrible situation where everybody just surrenders or whatever, but it can cause a lot of trouble. Of course, it causes, the way things are, the way it's like gnashing teeth fitting together, zipper teeth or something like that, everything is kind of chaotic. Beginning to regret not attacking. So the Austrians kind of held their position here, figuring, well, the French will have to attack in most cases. I didn't want to attack with shaken or weak units because they're likely to break apart. But the quantity of French skirmishers available meant that the French get all this fire coming in. Now, of course, the impact of losing a close combat and the nastiness of the close combat table probably means that's pretty damn horrible. But the skirmishers managed to rout this unit. They would disorganize these, which would make them, even better targets for the French attack. It is kind of iffy to try to stand and hold your ground. It's I got lucky, essentially, that the French really only picked off some artillery crews and took out, they sent the advance guard running. Interesting fact, it doesn't look like a rout through zones of influence or anything like that has any real effect. The units are already running. The big thing is the morale impact of the fire. Just like skirmishers, their big thing is that they cause a morale hit. If they don't pick off the artillery crew, they're not going to kill very many men. And the unit isn't charging forward, in pursuit. They can do that. They can do that after the unit's routed. The rout movement is only 6 hexes. A unit in column has more movement points than that. Not a whole hell of a lot more, though. So, because these guys were kind of surrounded, they're slowed down. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I could actually hit them. Otherwise, you're just running after them. Now, your skirmishers who can follow with you, they don't have that much movement on their own. So if they rout something out in front, they're not going to be able to pursue. But your skirmishers will be able to plink away and continue, not really to do anything, to rout the unit again, basically, because all it causes is morale checks. Unlike in the old versions of the game, version 2 and earlier, morale checks would cause stragglers, right? So, if you were shooting at things that were routed or whatever, at the very least, you'd weaken the unit and make it harder to bring it back together. It would disintegrate even further. There's no such effect here. I kind of don't like that. I feel like the zone of influence, I feel like there should be more to units routing, either through zones of influence or skirmisher fire on routed units and whatnot. There should be something that breaks them apart and causes them to disintegrate more than merely the rout, which can be recovered, in as short as 3 turns, basically, all the way up to good order, if you're lucky. Chances are it's not going to be that quickly. But compare that to straggler recovery, which if you're still operating and functioning, you're not going to ever get those back, right? You have to actually go rest the unit and gather the rest of the formation. All right. I think that's all the firepower, and now we have a few close combats, not very many. I didn't want to use the cav. First of all, these guys are in square. But using cav to attack on the attack phase is not very useful unless you want to get the enemy into square so that you can shoot them with artillery, or to charge enemy cav so that they can't interfere with you. Cav is primarily a defensive function, short those 2 situations. One's very special case, being able to force the enemy into a square so you can bombard that square with advantages. Cav versus cav feels pretty normal. Whoever gets the cav advantage, though, then has kind of a defensive advantage. Conceivably, you might swing. I don't have the command radius to do this. You might swing around and try to, scare somebody from behind. And that could cause some issues. But it's not much. If you look at the attacked in rear is a -2. So there's a good chance you'll be able to butcher them. They won't actually be able to form their square or whatever. This game handles squares a little differently than everything else. The net effect comes out about the same, but you automatically achieve square formation. But, well, now wait a minute. You can't be attacked in the rear if you're in the square. Yeah, you automatically achieve square formation, so you wouldn't get this. So yeah, I don't. I think actually, I think this game is actually friendlier on the infantry than a lot of games. If you look at the Viva l'Empereur, and certainly, certainly Viva l'Empereur, and I think Labatt, you can position cav around behind somebody and launch a charge, and they have to check to form square. And if they don't get it, they get that big penalty for being smacked in the rear. Here, there's plenty of time to form into square. So I think there's a little bit of fuzziness there that I don't really like. And pretty mixed results, but interestingly localized. So right through here, the Austrians have re-established their line with a couple of attacks, I believe. One that I screwed up completely, rolled. I picked the wrong unit. I thought I was attacking this unit. I wasn't. I was attacking like this unit or something, and had to unwind and redo the results, which turned out exactly the opposite, because the Austrian unit was a fairly large unit. The unit it was actually hitting was relatively small. The unit I checked first was equal in size, so the Austrians failed their morale check first, which I didn't think, But elsewhere, we can see they got kind of repulsed here. I don't know if they got blown away anywhere. I don't know, but it's still a muddled mess. And I got one more I gotta do. The mess just keeps getting worse as the lines are engaging. Rallies causing issues because some of the routed units required disordered markers. That meant more shaken markers all over the place. You're seeing they're spreading outside of the immediate area of the battlefield, etc. There really just aren't enough counters in Aspern Essling, unfortunately. And my reason, I tried to explain this, but I failed, I think. My reason for not pillaging other games is this sort of, well, I want to know which game it came from. It's not like I'm going to sell them. This is something that came up with the GBOH. Like, I know guys who put all their GBOH stuff in one all their maiden counters in one bag or whatever. And that means they have way more than they need if they remember to transfer that bag to the set they're carrying. And that's fine, at some points, but it's kind of an annoyance otherwise. And sometimes the shadings are a little different and everything. And it's just like, if they were significantly different, I wouldn't mind. But yeah, this particular game definitely has a problem on this level. And how terrible is it? I don't know. I'm not taxed to the point where I've got no solution. I might end up getting that way. But it does add to the sort of mechanical aspects of the game being more difficult. And the mental mechanical, because I have to remember, what the different representations are that I've chosen. Anyhow. And it means that doing a turn of this, even though much, much smaller, one map and everything, is, again, it's like doing a full turn with battles all along the front of the Viva l'Empereur series. Something like, well, not something like, when I did the Leipzig game with its 9 maps or whatever, or is it 10? 10 maps. I think it's 10. You know, just huge battle, huge quantities of counters and everything. Takes forever to get down the line, but each aspect of the battle is fairly light and easy. Of course, you don't get the kind of realism you get here. And I have the same kind of gripe about Labatt, where it's worse because it's at the regimental scale. So, you know, any important battle is going to be pretty damn big, right? You know, something like this is going to probably be a 4-mapper with, you know, 3 times as many counters or whatever. And it gets painful. It gets painful, especially if they choose to, like, create a special rules system for that particular game, don't write it well, and throw all kinds of problems into the scenario, into the actual scenario setup and whatnot. And of course, with Labatt, you have counters that are almost, you know, impossible to understand what the hell is going on because they don't give you the information on the front that you actually need. But all right. All this consideration, you know, seeing how the battle should actually resolve at this kind of tactical level, and the same with the Labatt, leads me to say, well, you know, the old NBS series and the Viva l'Empereur series, and I really do like Viva l'Empereur, but they give you a false impression of what's going on in too much detail. Like, they're showing you what's not Napoleonic combat, but what is more like a lot of fire combat going on. That looks like it's at further range. Now, maybe you can play these games better, throw more close combats in, whatever. But it is a reasonable option to engage at kind of Civil War style fighting, where the rifle is more important and everything. And they just give you kind of a false impression, I think, of what can be done and what does work and whatever. Whereas this, and I assume Labatt, you know, I mean, yes, I got into playing it in Dresden finally, but, you know, there were just so many burdens in the way. It gives you a much more detailed and accurate view of sort of the tactical situation. But what this all leaves me with is wow, this is really expensive to cope with, and so is Labatt. A little bit more appreciation for what I've always kind of shied away from, which was the Zucker games and, you know, the old Napoleon at Waterloo and whatnot that handle that really, really sort of almost generic feel. Oh, look, you're going to fight on a CRT, you know. If you're not willing to go to this level of detail, the level that tries to present at this level of detail but gets it all wrong, even though I really liked, you know, and the Brigade series, and I really do like Viva l'Empereur, they give you a wrong feeling. You know, they're not showing you what's actually happening. They're going into details that they can't support with the lightness of the rules. Whereas the Zucker games at least kind of say, you know, you're going to get the right kind of results off of this, and we're not telling you any lies, which, you know, it's probably a better solution than the sort of intermediate of the old NBS series or whatever. Much as I don't like to have to admit that. Back to the game. I actually did something good. I went for a walk today. I haven't gone for a walk just for pleasure in a long time. Unfortunately, I'm so fucking far out of shape. Either for whatever reason, and it's hard to judge because I had trouble with my shopping trip. I made it dancing, and I spend more energy on that than, you know, than any of these other activities. And I seem not to have been particularly, wiped out by that or whatever more than usual. But just down my hill and up. Anyway. For the French, I had moved Napoleon and Legrand together here. Legrand's in charge of 4th Corps now. But with the low ammo marker in place, with 6th Corps moving into Aspern, I think I'm not getting the opportunity to move forward. I don't think I can win the fight. I had to check the effects of the low ammo, but it's they're not good. -1 check to stand, artillery penalized, not going to matter, and attack stoppage checks modified with an additional -2, which really means that's an already battered force. I think I'll just stand. I'll stay where I am, which is good because this is more than enough pain for me for the rest of the game, really. And it may be the only real attack that we see, the only attack on this scale. It's one of the things when I talk about, hey, it does really present things kind of nicely, but when you launch an attack like this, the units are so wrecked, they're not able to fight again. They spend maybe an hour and a half fighting. That's it. That's all they can handle for the day. They're pretty wiped out by it, unlike if you play under the older system, where it's got a more CWB type feel to it, where units can stand next to each other and trade shots for quite some time. But also unlike what you would see when I said, hey, the Zucker systems kind of, abstract away so much, but they don't tend to show the level of destruction that you see in an all-out assault like this. And it may be that that's abstracted away completely. And, when you roll on the combat results table, quite often you get retreats or whatnot. It's just a matter of you've kind of outmaneuvered the enemy and put them in a position where they don't want to stand. Obviously if you get an eliminated result or something, that's pretty impressive. But you don't see the other, you don't see, I'm trying to remember, but the ones that I can remember feel like they're Napoleon at Waterloo, basically. You really don't see both sides just wiped out. I mean, yes, there's probably exchange results in them, which would kind of reduce the strength of the units and make them less capable of fighting. But here you have things, these corps are no longer capable of fighting when this fight is done, is my feeling. Neither of them. One side is going to get the worst of it, but everything is pretty worn out at the end of time. At the end of the fighting time. And, the slices in this, the amount of time for a battle or whatever is about the time that a turn or so takes place in that system. So I feel like the units have too much resilience in the Zucker systems compared to what they have here. And presumably, again, presumably Labatt gives you similar results to this, but I don't know how to mechanically operate my units in Labatt well enough to be sure. When I played, I feel like there weren't massive fighting going on. Nothing along this line. I may have been I may be misremembering, but when I played Dresden, I don't remember it having these sort of massive attacks going on. Some of that is because the terrain was so defensively oriented that, but also may have just been an unwillingness to launch something of this size. The mess has taken its toll as I'm running down the line, firing my skirmishers off for the French. I came to a unit that I failed to handle the close combat for. So I'll go back and do that. But, that's the kind of thing that this kind of mess, encourages, basically. They're trying to think of a better word, but you know what I mean. Another mistake, which is I forgot to roll for the core attack stoppages. Neither one was achieved. It was actually possible for Udino, I believe. I mean, it was possible for either, but you got to roll a 2 for Davu. Udino, it had to be a 4, which gets significantly more likely to fail. I rolled a 6, so, it wasn't likely to happen. I did roll for the ammo reductions on everything, but I forgot about core attack stoppage, which is weird because, I was thinking about the command phase. Hey, did I want to deal with this? But I thought about that, came on video about that and about life, and then forgot the other step that I should have remembered. I probably would have remembered if I wasn't videoing it. Can't guarantee it, because, it's a big complex system. It really is. And I'm not a person who likes to follow the sequence of play once I start to feel like I'm getting comfortable. When I first came back to it, the first day, first couple turns, I don't know if that was all in one day the way I play, but, I did have to. But now I just feel like, yeah, I know this system, right? Well, sometimes you make errors, but sometimes you make errors anyway. These guys, they got repulsed, disordered, and took out a gun basically because of it. Now that gun's not going to be able to fire. I think the Austrians are in pretty shitty shape. I think next turn they may have to make the decision to pull out, do the emergency withdrawal. At least up here with the, what is that, 4th Corps, including the advanced guard, which is now attached. The R looks pretty beat up too. The 2nd Corps is in okay shape, and I feel like it would be a violation to have them withdraw without orders, even though technically I have full control over whether or not, yes, we're being destroyed. I just don't buy that. That's like getting around the orders rules, if that's the case. But here, I think I'm definitely in danger of being wiped out. I want to dedicate the messiness of this situation, counter skewed, so I can see stuff, not everything in its proper hex and whatever, to Billy Boy. I really miss his insight on the fora, and it's been a few years, I think, I don't know, a couple of years probably. It's hard to tell, time's so weird now, but he used to always get so pissed when, he'd take a camera shot of what the positioning was, and people would be like, straighten your counters up, soldier, and I just remember his reaction to that being, yeah. And, yeah. He was a good guy, at least online. Excuse anybody, I use that qualifier because I never met him in person, but I think he would have been fun to game with from what I've seen. Question for the French is, look, I outgun the Austrians because of my skirmishers. I can stand at distance and light them up. And I know this doesn't feel very Napoleonic, but their withdrawal will be painful. Not terrible. There's not withdrawal fire or anything like that except from artillery, where they get their up fire in there. But maybe my best answer is not to smack into those disordered units. They're likely to run, but I don't really think that I can be pawing through other people's stacks, and even if I can, I cannot be looking at their loss chart. Which means I don't know how big what I'm facing actually is, right? And so, yeah, I got shaken units up against a bunch of disordered units. I should be able to take them. This is like a condition where maybe I would launch close combats under the old NBS system, but under this one, where I'm not certain to get a good result. So if I charge in under the old system, because fire is simultaneous, both sides take losses, and then both sides take their morale checks. First the attacker, then the defender usually. I think always. That means I get a guaranteed hit on them. right? And they're disordered, their firing back's going to be shitty. That is not represented under this new system. Hitting those disordered units is no different than hitting a fresh unit if I fail my my attack roll, unless I'm missing something. I do not see anything about disorder having anything. So before, because it used the fire combat tables and disordered units had half fire combat across the board, when you went into close combat, you would roll, they would be rolling half their firepower essentially against you. So you were likely to do, even if you're equal size units, about twice the damage that they're doing, on average, whatever. They're also more likely to break than you are, but you have to check first. Under the new system, I don't know who has to check first. I just don't know that as the attacker. And that means that's a huge deal because my units are shaken. They may not make it. They may get their asses handed to them by that disordered force. I don't know which makes more sense, but I do feel like the final push is being obviated. At least my desire to make it is, because, geez, I don't know if I'm going to be able, to wipe those units out. Before, under the old system, I'd push forward, we'd exchange some fire combat. Whoever came out worse in the morale state of that would probably get the final push applied to them, if I was playing it right at least. Probably usually say, I don't want to do close combat, that's too complicated, and just keep trading shots knowing that I'm going to win the fight. But no, here it almost feels like, yeah, there's something being encouraged that is not what I want to do. In addition, I certainly don't want to play around here where I've got Cav that might be smacking into me. Of course, I can switch from I can change formation freely. Takeaway for all that is making these games is hard. It's you're trying to represent such a complex situation that in a fairly limited rule set, a fairly limited amount of mechanical complexity, etc. And yeah, I'm going in, but not from up here. These guys are a little small and low morale. These guys, I don't want to leave because of the obvious. They're the Cav. But from back here, I was able to launch one, which is going to be a rear attack. And I think, so the order of checks is problematic. These guys are pinned down in the front. They can't turn and face this, right? They're pinned down in the front. They're getting hit in the rear by fresh units who may or may not be as big as them. But what it's going to all come down to is which force is the bigger size. This is likely to survive its morale check, so it's okay. But if those were like shaken units or kind of poor morale, a C morale unit, I think they're an A, which means they automatically succeed. If they were like a C morale unit or something, you're taking a risk trying to hit something that like should just collapse from that hit. Right? I mean, maybe not guaranteed, but it certainly should be making its morale check first, right? And this is what's problematic, is like there's situational things that even if you accept the way the system works in general, you're gonna find weird cases like this where I'm hitting it in the rear with fresh troops, but if those troops were not very good, they might break before they hit that rear. And that's almost impossible. I mean, unless they were raw recruits, man, there's not much that's going to scare them away. Even a C morale, some regulars have C morale. Most have B. But, the B morale could break. I looked at those French units. I'm like, screw that, man. These are all good units. So, boom, in I go. Still haven't moved the final line there. Yes, I'm taking a lot of effort on this part of the game, but this is the game. This is all there is, really. This is everything we've seen beforehand seemed boring and dull, and hey, we're waiting, a little trade of fire. This was maybe a little exciting, a little bit going on here, but most of the time spent on the game so far has been, these little, I come up for a turn if I'm lucky or whatever, and I'm mainly just recovering stragglers from the previous day. So, and it wasn't this kind of fight the previous day, but now I'm just smashing, what would I say? Maybe half the French force into about half the Austrian force, about a little less than half. Oh, wait, forgot to check my cav. Are they awake yet? Yeah, keep forgetting things, huh? They're not awake. They're on a D6. They're just never going to get their orders. So I have to make this whole attack without the cav support. There was notorious problems with the cav cooperation in this battle, so I don't mind too much, but in some ways, sometimes the system kind of lets you down, but some of this is because Bessier is like a mighty one, isn't he? Yeah, that's what's wrong here. And that reflects, but it's still possible to get a fucking D6. Even over here on the 10 or more table, which is like almost impossible to reach. But that's okay. Sometimes orders got mistaken and whatnot. Yeah. But, to get up there, you're talking two good leaders, in-person verbal orders, basically. A couple of loose leaders who I pushed into combats. And the reason that happens is what you see right here. In order to figure out the combat results for this system, you really have to pull the units out of a hex and kind of expose them all so that you can do all the lookups and everything. Each close combat is such a pain. Such a pain. But since there's no fire combat between regular units, that means that I don't have to keep looking up, hey, are you an A size, a B size? So these old markers that I used to use for B's and C's to indicate, hey, I got reduced firepower from this unit, those no longer really serve a purpose. Most units are at least A's anyway. Back every so often just to sort of indicate what's happened. We've routed a couple of the Austrian units, but we also had a rout on our own. However, this is a French unit that succeeded sent somebody routing. This is going pretty well for the French so far. A lot of times they're having to make the check first, though, and I hate to do that. It gets more extreme results. The advantage is in my favor, but I could lose. I can't lose with the skirmisher firing, and the disordered Austrians can't hurt me. They can't charge me, basically. So, I'm giving up a low-risk, guaranteed result, which I'm pretty much a risk-averse type of person, against trying to win the battle a little more quickly. I also wanted to mention, Jesus, something's so wrong with me, because just standing here playing is exhausting me, physically exhausting. I had this happen back with Leipzig as well. There, at least, I had to walk around a lot. But, I'm bent over. That seems to be a factor in it. But the major one seems to be using my brain. It's like heavy thinking. It tires me out physically. Like and I think this is a COVID-related thing, as opposed to just being terribly out of shape. It doesn't make sense that my brain would affect me in that sort of way otherwise. But, there's definitely shit going on with bloodstream and neural effects with the long COVID. And I don't know. I thought I was okay, But now that it's kind of winter and everything, it's hitting me harder than it was before. Of course, I'm also more active in the sense that I'm playing a game, not just sitting in my fucking chair. Another, just came in, one more French success, blew away some of fourth corps. Again, had to check first, but my check didn't matter. I was good enough. And this was one where I probably shouldn't have even had a leader, because I would have only failed on a one without the leader, but they threw him in this one instead of somewhere else for whatever reason, and drove back some disordered units. But the key here is I'm losing leaders like mad. If we look here, Davout's corps, Friant and Gudin have both gone. They're the two divisional leaders present on the battlefield. And then over here, Rohan, I think, was lost earlier, but we lost this Prochaska just now. So yeah, 3 leaders have gone down, 2 French, one Austrian. The Austrian one went down the same turn, the same battle that Gudin went down. I like to think they charged at each other and hacked at each other with their sabers. On the other side of the line now, just because it's easier to reach things when they're not in the middle. Eventually I have to hit there though. Not a great result for the French. The Austrians got a really good casualty result, even though the French got a loss result. Now, actual casualties are limited, but stragglers are not. So the French took a fair amount of stragglers. Their unit got wrecked. That's what happened here. But also, oh, it's worse than that, isn't it? We had a morale on there too. That's a routed unit. So both sides routed, which is always kind of weird. We'll just keep moving those. I'll remember to do that. But also I lost another leader, Thoreau, in this case. So Oudinot here has lost 2 of his 3 division commanders. I mean, this is brutal, man. Final part, that whole sort of, I don't know, heart of the Austrian left flank. The attack there, more or less horrible for everyone. You see a lot of French routed, but a lot of Austrian routed too. Basically, the lines collapsed in both cases. There's nothing left there. I had unlimbered a bunch of guns in the event that things didn't go well. Now, I didn't bring them right up to the line, because I learned my lesson with that. That's a little too dangerous, but a couple hexes away, especially since I can use mass battery fire with the French, certainly, under conditions. But this is all 2 corps, so I could probably arrange those how I like. I would be able to, maybe get a good column, like the 2 column instead of the 1 column with some of those shots. And there's also some heavies there, which is nice. And really light up the Austrians. I think this is a French unit here. This is an Austrian unit here that's going to be facing some guns. But yeah, I mean, the Austrian left flank has collapsed, but the French ran away. And yeah, sometimes that happens. You drive the enemy away, but you don't realize it. But on this scale, it's kind of weird. It doesn't usually happen that way. In terms of results, we got a lot of firefight results, which, and then units broke, which in terms of becoming wrecked, which drives their morale down another level. Sometimes they can get a morale result off here as well. So for the most part, the actual casualties weren't that bad. We had cases where the Austrians won the battle, but still routed. Just all kind of shit happening all over the place there. Interesting stuff. Yeah, the kind of thing that when you're playing with someone, it sometimes sticks a little note in my head when I'm playing solo, but it's the kind of thing that's a lot more fun opposed, I have to say. It's just the experiential aspect of it is more enjoyable with someone when you hit those kind of really oddball situations. You have a little giggle about it or whatever. Ran out of route counters, though, you can see, pretty badly. Again, the counter mix for this is just not sufficient for the size of the battle. And it's not like the battle historically was smaller. It's not like it was done piecemeal. Sure, the first day was, but when you get to Napoleon's eventual attack, it was not too different from this. It was massive forces smashing into each other in an open plain, and the game just does not support that with the countermix that it has, for whatever reason. 12:30 turn was probably the biggest turn in the game. The French aren't going to be ready to launch another attack of that nature. Their second corps, pretty beaten up. Third corps, pretty beaten up. Austrians in no position either. We already know that the 6th is in okay shape, but the First Corps, pretty beat up. Second Corps, kind of sporadic, but not in great shape. Fourth Corps, disintegrated almost. The reserves, the infantry, are pretty beaten up. Only the cav is really available. So this is kind of, from now on, it's sort of, well, what can you fall back to not expose too bad a line? My guess is French are perhaps going to get Neuschwanstein, but they can easily get Rosdorf over there. This is a couple more points than they had. It's still not a decisive victory in terms of what land we grabbed, but we've pushed the Austrians back. We maintained our beachhead, our bridgehead. We've expanded it so that we have room for additional forces to come over and deploy kind of nicely and maneuver about. We're not like trapped against the river. You know, it could be possible that you were just completely hemmed in with just the bridgehead. It's a little better than that. And then the casualties are going to tell the rest. I doubt we're going to see a hell of a lot more fighting. Even though these corps have orders to move and keep fighting in this direction, and they're going to fall apart, you know. The orders are. What do I have left? Sure, I have the Imperial Guard left. I don't want to send the Guard on its own. I've got Lannes' his division basically over here. And I've got the entirety of the fucking cav still left. Basically unused. Both sides' cav is largely unused. The Austrian cav was unable to, was in a stupid position. And that's the kind of thing that's hard to understand. Like how and where you have to position your cav for it to be effective. It's like, it's the kind of complexity that the Napoleonic side of things, you know, makes much, much more painful than, say, the American Civil War stuff. What's especially problematic here is the fact that this cav is associated with the reserve corps. I wanted to put the reserve infantry in a particular place. There was a gap I needed to fill, and that forced my reserve cav to not be forward enough to really apply a lot of pressure. It still wouldn't have been enough because the frontal attack couldn't have been easily addressed. I would have had to have the cav all the way around on the flank and just breaking it up. And all it would do is break up the attack, right? It would slow it down more than anything else. Yes, every now and then the cav would get successful and wipe out a whole brigade, but for the most part, it's not really anything except sort of a defensive positioning, a threat that that when you activate the threat, it stops the infantry. And then the question is, how badly does the cav get hurt most of the time? Every now and then the infantry will get butchered though. And of course, I managed to preserve the cav, which, you know, if you use it heavily in that defensive type of situation, it starts taking some casualties. And remember, the cav costs more in this scenario than the infantry does. So losing cav is problematic. Especially if all you're doing is delaying the infantry. Still, you know, a little low on countermix, but a lot better than we were. French units beginning to recover over here. All right. And with that, and my fatigue, that is probably it. Well, certainly during the daylight hours of today. It might be back up at some point. Excuse me. Into the 1 p.m. turn. Austrian Czechs. The reserve corps, which is sort of where the central hit went, is getting an emergency withdrawal. I may trigger one over on the 4th Corps as well, voluntarily, simply because, man, they can't hold. The problem is, though, then that abandons 2nd Corps out here. And you can make a reasonable argument for they're in danger of being surrounded. Not a great argument, because right now they haven't taken the brunt of much hit, but they're way out there. Luckily, though, 2nd Corps is headquartered back here. I could actually fall back and give some ground without an emergency withdrawal. That's more likely the reasonable choice. I'm seeing a line that'll probably form along here, which is obviously not optimal. I'm abandoning the game at that point. And then again, you know, one of the problems with victory conditions is we're used to kind of the chess-like mentality, right? Where it's like, well, did I win or did I lose? Or is it a draw? And that's where you get concessions and whatever coming in. I don't really buy that. That's not the mindset that the generals are under. That's why Napoleon did want to attack again, and why I went through with that, and why, if I've got the Austrians on the run, I'm probably going to pursue them again. Now, obviously, if you're playing a competitive game, you know, an opposed game with someone, the Austrians at this point would probably concede the game if, you know, there was no real interest in seeing how it turns out anyway. But I've got that interest, so I will continue to plow through. Plus, I don't know, I'm kind of getting a kick out of it, even though I'm not playing as hard as I used to. Rolls lookups, and I got a question right now of, hey, can I fire my guns when I do an emergency withdrawal? I kind of did so back here. I think the answer is no. But here's the problem. Skirmishers, well, I think skirmishers may be allowed to fire. If skirmishers aren't allowed to fire, I don't buy it at all. If the artillery is not allowed to fire, look, they're packing up and they're getting out of there. That's their main goal. They're not worried about any kind of covering fire or anything. Although you could make an argument that they should, but whatever. But there is, if I recall correctly, a rule that says you can't fire your guns when you're under no orders, which to me is like, well, you certainly shouldn't be able to fire them when you're under, you know, this sort of panicked retreat that an emergency withdrawal represents. I felt like I did have to look up the rule because whatever. So under no order status, you can't even fire the skirmishers, which, boy, does that kind of bug me. But the idea there is you're kind of in a, I don't know what it is. Since it's kind of a reserve type situation in some cases, it makes perfect sense, right? You know, we're surprised, whatever, but you don't fall out of no orders when undertaking fire and in the next turn achieve an order status, like a defense or a fallback or whatever. After 2 turns in no orders, you have to withdraw with, I think, an emergency withdrawal, if I recall correctly, but I didn't look that up. But when I looked up the emergency withdrawal rules, you fall into no orders eventually, but you're not in it immediately, which to me means that, yeah, maybe I can fire my guns to protect that withdrawal. It's not going to make much difference in this case. The Austrian position is pretty much degraded, but it does mean that I did things right the last time when I did allow a little bit of firing. First Corps had a couple of guns that they fired before they took off. So I feel a little better about that. But yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, hey, how this all fits together. And, you know, again, it all did fit together by the time, you know, version 2 point whatever, I don't know if it was 2.2 or something like that, or maybe they just stopped at 2.0, was done. Although they did some online revision versions, so who knows. This is 2.1. This is probably the latest that there was, what came with Aspern Essling in terms of printed versions of the rules. I think they went beyond 2.1 on an electronic version. And, you know, I have errata and whatnot to this version penciled in. But unlike that old system, which inconsistencies sort of got shaken out of it, 3.0 kind of stopped any efforts whatsoever soon after this the Talavera box was released. There might be a few errata and whatever to it, but once it became clear that this was not taking off, and some obscure battles in Spain were not going, with a new system, were not selling well, and the Dean decided to cut the system entirely. And I suspect he wasn't happy with 3.0 before it got released. I suspect that he had, I think I've said this before, but a bias against it. It changed his design significantly, made the game much, much heavier to play. And even if it, may be the best in terms of realism and meeting my needs from an analytical standpoint, whatever, of a Napoleonic system that produces things reasonably, it still is fucking cumbersome. And I've got my gripes about that. I blow hot and cold because it is so good at certain things, but it did not get that shakeout period. You look at most of the gamers, Dean's designs, and they get, one after another game coming out on them. And this really is a completely new, a complete rewrite of the system. It's a redesign of the system. It's so significantly different that it's bound to have rough edges. We've seen some of them, and this is one of them. All right. So I'm choosing to do that, and let's skedaddle. And I'm delaying the hell out of this. I just had an interview, a very short one, where I was able to clarify something and basically indicate that, yeah, I'm not really eligible for this position. There's just, this sort of, oh, geez, I know once I start moving pieces, I'm stuck here doing that. And the withdrawal is not a clean one. We got units that were too close in disordered formations, falling back a little bit, exposed to a possible advance. Got this stuff back here that, rallied, but is now in problematic position. One thing that's good is that the route countermix is back. I've got a couple extra counters and whatnot. The Shakens, still not. They were close to being okay. I had 2 or 3 of them before. I'm still at about the same level, but I had to replace a lot of Shakens that are going to recover immediately as soon as the French take their turn. I'm not going to take that right away. Again, things are a little too, I'm just playing too slowly, but things are moving. There's still too much to do mechanically on the board for me to want to jump right into another turn the way that, I was barely able to convince myself when nothing was happening. All I was doing was rolling straggler recoveries. We actually had a couple straggler recoveries back here where the Austrians are beginning to reform a line. The line that they're going to produce out of this is not going to be pretty. It's also all kind of under no orders, which is not good. It's one thing that this system shows that the other ones didn't. The other ones showed this kind of, an army broke, fell back a little bit, and kind of was automatically formed and ready for action again. under the, hey, as soon as you do the emergency withdrawal, you're back to not having orders, which means you're in defense. Well, now, kind of like the default defend orders, you really are in a dangerous position, and there's a possibility of a real pursuit happening here. Again, I think this is more suitable in the Napoleonic era, and I think it's more problematic in the American Civil War era. For whatever reason, I actually don't know the why, but there's more decisive battles that happen. It may be the prevalence and predominance of the cavalry arm more than anything else. But there's definitely more of a, hey, you know, they won the battle and then captured a bunch of enemy. It was really a decisive victory. Whereas when you get to the American Civil War, the capacity, and again, it may be for the same reason that the cav become ineffective in the ACW, it may be the power of the riflery. The fact that infantry is just so much more powerful that you're not relying on getting that exact massed formation back into position. A fair amount of musketry can repulse the enemy from an attack so that the defense is just favored overall. And you're also not relying on the artillery being set up and whatnot for your defense. So there are reasons I can think of. I just, you know, I can't stand absolutely one on the other as to why there were decisive battles in the Napoleonic era, and there really were not in the American Civil War. You know, the big battles, the big victories, it generally resulted in both armies being too battered to go on. And one of the arguments you could make there is, well, the command and control wasn't as established and whatnot. But even late in the war, you had this kind of, both sides were still about able to fight equally well as you know, soon after the battle, whatever that meant. They were either so battered that they didn't want to fight, or later in the war, the command and control maybe improved, but on both sides, so that Lee could continue his defensive falling back through the wilderness again in the late stage of the war, as you will see in Lee versus Grant if you go back to that video. I think this is actually a good place to stop this video. Well, let me do the French turn too, because we'll see how tight that pursuit is. The French took some losses. They're going to have potential corps stoppages. I think we're coming to a point where the battle switches gears again. And it may just not be a battle after this. It may settle down to that there isn't a pursuit. Because if the French were still healthy, they could still keep going. They've got better leadership, etc. So they got a chance of it. But yeah, they also have a chance of just kind of falling on their face and saying, you know what, we done good enough. We got this line, that's great. They started the turn, the French did their mechanical rolls, including corps attack stoppage. No stoppage, we had a low ammo over here, which is what I started looking up, and I ran into someplace where, let's see what we got here. I don't remember. Under minor variants, the commitment of the Grenadier is, in any scenario, let the 1G and 2G enter with the reserve corps headquarters. Give the French 2 victory points. Well, my 1G and 2G are on the board. They're those high-quality units in the Grenadier. Now, the Grenadier got its attack stoppage here, but they're these very, very good units here that got thrown in. So the French are actually ahead more than I thought by them coming in. Now, why did I put them in such a weird position? Well, first day, 1G and 2G are not used in this scenario. Okay, that's fine. Second day, setup has them not on the board. but it has them come in at 9 a.m. as just part of the reinforcements with orders. Now, on the main scenario, it did not have them. It says they're not used in this scenario. I thought that was a typo copied over from the first scenario. I don't know if this is in the original. It probably is. So I marked them down as the 9 a.m. reinforcement as if they should come in. Maybe the idea here is the second day. Well, no, I mean, the French lost the second day, right? I mean, they got their asses kicked. They got pushed back, essentially. So I don't know what the intention here is, whether, if they come in the first day or second day, if that's supposed to be the case. If we look here, in any scenario, let these divisions enter with the Reserve Corps headquarters. Okay, that's at an earlier point, so that's the issue. So I don't think I get the victory points here. I think those victory points only apply if you bring them in early in the game, and that this is the historical, and that this 9 a.m. reinforcement here was just left out because in the second day historical scenario, it's there. Now, what I was trying to look up was what the effect of these guys is. Attack stoppage checks are modified by -2. I think I succeeded anyhow. I had that in mind, I know, but I may have forgotten it again. But I have to check the other factors. Infantry, -1 check to stand. Artillery get a penalty, and cav and skirmishers are unaffected. So the pursuit probably isn't too dangerous. I may not want to charge into close combat so much, but harass them with skirmishers, because we're still under orders. The cav still didn't come in. Well, I'm charging into some people. Pursuit going on. Attacks up here, down here. I don't think this is an attack. That one is the Cav, French 4th Corps, 2nd Division, 4th Corps Cav. Threw them into a square, took a little bit of damage bouncing off of it. Basically, that was protecting themselves and a unit. Like, they would have to withdraw no matter what. They wouldn't get blown, but they would have to withdraw. So they did that. We had some blown cav withdraw as well. That may not be the one because it's facing the wrong way. But yeah, And I guess it's time to, well, first counterfire if there is any. There might be a little bit, but I don't see it likely. Because I'm either in close combat or I'm next to disordered stuff. But there are things like this that I have to check. No, that's close combat there. And it's such a mess right now. It's hard to figure out what the hell is going on. But I don't think there is any. And I don't think I have any guns open. I have these guys, but they don't really have line of sight. Remember, this blocks. So, yeah. And it would just be long-range plinking that basically does nothing, I guess. Realizing my withdrawal of our corps, I failed a corps attack check to get there. They weren't on attack orders. I was basically playing with some kind of weird mutant defensive orders rules from the old system, enrolling that. It's not unreasonable that they chose to do that. There was not really an easy position. I was not in a good place where I was. So, but I did not have to roll. You can stand on defense for forever under this system. I'm having trouble keeping things. I mean, my brain is not working properly anymore. The last couple of years, it has been deteriorating rather rapidly, along with everything else. And again, I blame the long COVID on that. It's just not. And with the winter weather, it started to hit again. Like during the summer, it didn't really hurt me as badly. but it seems, it's weird because it's periodic, and that's something that, like, I haven't heard much about. There's always, there's good days and bad days. It's not like that for me. It's like, it's good for a long period of time, and then everything seems to fall apart worse. The zone of influence rules again. Again, these are new to this series, to this version of the series. And they're a little different from how I thought. I thought it was adjacent units. It's not for rallying. It's zone of influence for rallying. And disordered and routed units don't provide a zone of influence anyway. So this attack, which just went in there and was disordered by it, and disordered its enemy in a firefight, I guess. Yeah. Is repulsed back, but it does get to rally. I don't know if I've screwed that up earlier in the game. I may well have. But what it does mean is, for pursuit at least, man, units are running up behind enemy units and rallying on the way, and I'm going to be able to get my skirmisher fire, which I would have gotten anyway because I was just shaken, but even units that are disordered and whatever are going to get their skirmisher fire. This guy's had a hell of a lot of hurt with artillery and skirmishers hitting him at the beginning. Well, not really. The artillery will hit him. The skirmishers get no opportunity fire, so he can back out of there a little bit, but he's in a bad place. A lot of the Austrians are in a bad place. The pursuit is definitely, for a number of reasons, not just the rallying capabilities, but for a number of reasons, it's really, really much more painful than I recall this being in the older system. I haven't rolled my routed units to see if they come back. I only have a couple of these left, and I've got white markers already on the board. And damn it all. A certain morbid curiosity or whatever, I decided to take a look here. The 1G and 2G are in the original version of the game. It just got left out of the new version. If anybody is watching all of this who has the ability to correct the online, I mean, it's only available online. So I think that's the end of the French turn. Yeah, this is, it's pretty fatiguing for what's turning into a rout, and I don't know how much longer I want to go. I mean, the Austrians basically are not going to be in a position to even stand anymore. Unfortunately, I'm not ready to start my next game yet, unless I pick something else. I started on the rolls a while back while I was on the computer and up here playing Raid, like on my, on a fake account, and then kind of stopped, and it's been, quite a while, because I was up here back when I was playing this earlier. It was my way of convincing me to play it. But I do really want to get to it. I was kind of thinking this would take me long enough to get through the book I'm reading, which is pretty interesting too. But all right. The Austrian rout continues. They're trying to form up a line here. Charles got his army headquarters moved a little bit back. He's trying to talk to at least one of the corps, the reserve corps. Those are some of his good units. They extend his line. We'll worry about 4th when he gets to it. That may be too late, In fact, the Reserve Corps may be too late as well with Liechtenstein in charge, because the French are pushing pretty hard against it. This is not an easy game system to, because of the weirdness about the no order status and whatnot. Just like so the same kind of effects that I saw in the collapses in the CWB system from the defensive order special rules are happening here. And I like those. I liked them in the CWB series too. I believed that units should be in trouble after they're pushed back. Now, the difference here is in CWB and in the older version, well, under the core rules without the defensive orders, we already know. You're essentially in a defend order all the time, and you can fire. Under the old defensive orders, a rout was less impactful because you had a couple of turns in this quasi-defensive orders situation. Here you don't. You have a couple of turns to stand there, but you don't have capacity to return fire or anything. You are a disorganized army at that point. And that's showing pretty nasty here. Like, part of me says Charles should be ordering, an overall retreat. But there's no means to do that in this system. There's nothing they can say, hey, try to retire from the field in an orderly manner, other than writing orders to do so. And that's as slow as writing orders to, hey, hold this ground. So, what you're going to end up seeing from all that is, well, I could do emergency withdrawals to get the same effect, but those represent more and more straggler losses, and thus a worse and worse situation. On the bright side, I finished the rules to the next thing I want to do. Like I said, unfortunately, I think the game that I was really hoping to get a preview copy for, or a review copy for, is just not going to come. And I'm not the kind of person, it's very, very difficult for me to reach out to the guy who contacted me and say, hey, you didn't send this, did you? It's more of a pain than the sort of not knowing is. I assume it would be better for him, but again, he didn't send me tracking information or anything, so just guessing. All right, I think the battle is over. I'm going to load this one up, and we will continue, I think, with a video for the pursuit. Although I might just decide, screw it, But there's a lot of time left. Napoleon's got additional forces coming on the board. And I'm torn here. I know that I've spent a fair amount of time on the last couple of turns, and I feel like it's a worthwhile video to put up. But I'm so worried that, I'll just call it within the next couple turns, because either the French stop, and I'm like, well, the Austrians are going to retire. They lost. There's no question about that. They don't want to maintain close contact with the French. Or the pursuit continues, and it's just so ugly that I'm like, the game's over, man. Do I really want to fight out something this effortful and time-consuming when I kind of know what the results are? The Austrian army is smashed. So it's like, yeah, I would know those things in the next couple of turns, but on the other hand, there is time for other stuff. So, yeah, I don't know. But since I don't know, and I can't know, the future is always opaque. I'll load this up. Well, no, we got the French turn to do again. Same position as last time. I'm ready to walk away. But no, let's do the French turn, get the half hour done, and see what happens, because whatever. But I want to get away from the camera because I got to pee real bad. Emptying my bladder. We got a withdrawal for Davout. He's got one wreck division out of 4, 2 that are on the board. However you want to look at it, it comes out the same, the 2 table. And he's the one who fell back. Not Oudinot. Oudinot is like, yeah, I'm still going. I don't care if I'm low on ammo. Screw that. They're running. Let's take them. And Davout's like, we won the battle. I marched a lot today. you got to sleep overnight here. So yeah, that generates an emergency withdrawal, which, again, that's not how I think the old system used to work. The old system used to let you just park, your attack petered out, and you get to stop. If I recall correctly, I'll look that up. Okay, first thing, the third corps was in worse shape than I thought. It was actually 2 out of 2 that are on the board rack, so I'm even less. They took quite a beating, apparently. Second corps took less of a beating, though, and a couple of units tried to engage this. 2 cav units fended them into square formation as they approached. If I had done it in the other order, brought one in from this side first, that would have been better. I could have forced an attack, but I'm not sure I really wanted one. And then I'm hitting some routed units up there. Those are automatic successes. I could still take some losses, but I don't have to roll check to stands or anything like that. So those guys are just gonna go. And I don't know. Is Napoleon trying to get? Where is he? Oh, he was talking to the guard and was going to try to convince them to throw them in for the coup de grace here. I feel like Davout's withdrawal, yeah, I mean, he withdrew. He fell back. Kind of makes me less pleased with the idea of throwing the Imperial Guard into the fight. And they're not really going to be able to help Oudinot. The question was, would they be able to extend this overall victory and just crush things across the board? Especially given that I have to order them by division, am hesitant to do this. We are at 1:30. Obviously cleared the routed guys out. Not much else happens. Bunch of rallying. You can see the French units look all happy. They're not. They're pretty damn chewed up. Second Corps, Third Corps. I think my thoughts right now are to call it. There might still be a little bit of pursuit here, but it's probably going to be hindered pretty heavily by those cav. They're in a position where they can really suppress any kind of attacks. There will be a cost to that, though, and I think Charles is going to decamp and head back. This ridgeline doesn't look like a bad place to fall back to, but it's not contesting the battlefield. So in terms of like the victory for this scenario, it's out of hand. But here's the thing. By calling it, I'm kind of saying, it's bigger. It's a bigger victory than what we see here right now. So what we see right now is 2. This wasn't worth anything. I thought it might be 4, 5. I don't know. There's lots of points here. 6, 7. I thought there's more. I thought there was another one in here. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 2, 3, 4, 5, which doesn't sound that bad, It's not great. And then we'll be looking at what else. Let's see what we got here. Direct formations include ignore stragglers for this purpose. There's not a lot that's wrecked in terms of permanent formation loss. So let's see what we're looking at there in terms of modifiers for that. So, and we'd also be counting total casualty boxes, which is, again, painful to do. I guess I'll come back with a count there. So right now we're at like, what, 11 to 5, but, you know, the Austrians are giving up the battlefield, right? It kind of doesn't matter, you know? It really kind of doesn't matter. The best you could argue is that they've got these 4. They're not going to hold Aspern. They're not going to hold this. They were actually, wait, they were at 2, 4, 6. This has to be worth at least 2, 8. So yeah, it's like 11 to 8 instead, not 6 or 5 or whatever I was coming. Oh no, I'm counting. No, Austrian points are less. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 11 to 5. Okay, but in effect, this road is going to be gone after any kind of withdrawal. Aspern is going to be retaken, or you know, there's just determining the tactical points at the end of a battle kind of doesn't make sense. Let me get the casualty points at least broadly and see what they're going to come out as. Only the French cav that count extra. The way they count extra is each unit is a half victory point. Garter a point each for each brigade. So no divisional points were lost. Well, whatever they are, the core points, because permanently wrecking a core means you have really wasted that thing. And I almost never see, I see very few units with permanent wreck status. The Austrians have a few. Over here, like Fresnel has taken a couple, barely. And you can see Rohan took a couple as well. Clanau's advanced guard is wrecked, but not permanently. It just got wrecked. It's such a huge fucking unit, but low morale. In terms of actual casualties, the Austrians took 143 to the French 97, but in both cases, that's worth 5 victory points. The reason being, the way this system tends to give you victory points for casualties is if you're a bigger army, you can afford to take more casualties, and the Austrians are a larger army. Would these numbers be enhanced a little bit? You know, maybe. Like I did some skewing with the points here, there might be a little bit more casualties on the Austrian side from the remainder of the pursuit, but it doesn't seem like much. What we saw from the fighting was sort of this immediate success in Aspern that I didn't really challenge because the French Fourth Corps was so beat up. So rather than, you know, expending the Fourth Corps to try to keep retaking Aspern or whatever, I just kind of sat back and, it might not have been a great idea, took artillery fire. I returned it, you know, but the fire coming out of the village was more telling than the fire going back into it, which might seem like an obvious case, but it really isn't, because only one gun can fire out of the village, whereas I could fire what seemed like a much larger proportion of artillery coming into the village. However, there's a column shift against you there, so, you know, it works. I think it's this one. It's been a while. Yeah. It's just a -1 to the total fire value, you know, which is a column shift in the fighting. So to me, it actually looked like the French had the advantage in firepower there, but they got worn down maybe somewhat by me cheating and allowing fire to traverse the dike a little bit more easily. The Austrians didn't really have an opportunity to push forward much further than that. The attack against the dike seemed like a little much. I was hoping for the French to come back at Aspern, or expecting that, and they didn't. And so I just kind of sat there. Then through the night, you know, not much happened. And then in the morning, you know, mid-morning, out around here, We start seeing Davout coming on the board. Oudinot made it in overnight. The French have a lot more forces on the board. And there was one or two turns where everything felt kind of in a weird balance because two big French corps heading up this way, and the Austrians launched an attack. That attack could have succeeded. In fact, it made some headway here, not enough, and the units failed their corps stoppage and fled back, which meant that this hammer could hit without Napoleon getting too much of an ulcer from the whole thing. It's kind of exciting towards the end, I have to say. Should I have played out more? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's a foregone conclusion. To me, this is, and they don't tell you how much you win by, right? They just give you points. It's not like I'm trying to meet some specific schedule or whatever. And so it's more interesting to think about what's happened here. Napoleon's got his bridgehead. He had a success here, a victory against Charles that, feels like it's on a scale with some of his earlier victories. Aspern Essling is not going to be, that bugaboo for him where he would say, you know nothing, you are not Aspern. He was driven from the town. Instead of turning it into a city fight, he sat back and waited on his reinforcements to come, and it worked out pretty much to his advantage. So one thing that I forgot, so there were basically, on the first day, there were two attacks, one against Aspern, which was very successful, and then one against Essling that's headed by that advance guard and the Fourth Corps. The advance guard couldn't do shit. The Fourth Corps pretty much got repulsed without taking too many losses, but it did hurt them when it came to defending up here. But the truth of the matter is, attacking a defensible position like the dike, the towns are less of an issue, although the granary and the garden changed that significantly for Essling. But Aspern is not much of a defensible position. I didn't feel like the Austrians had much chance to throw much more into the line. Charles's exuberance or not. He could have tried to press across here, but the French cav was all on the board. Any kind of attack across the dike, they would have gotten pretty much scattered by the... they would have gotten stopped. Would it be enough? I don't know. By the time the Imperial Guard shows up and whatnot, though, it starts getting a lot more questionable. And basically, the thing was, I didn't have the troops to launch an attack in the middle at that point. By the time I did, Oudinot's already on the board and at the dike. So the Austrians looked at, we're on the defensive at this point. They had already given up Gross-Enzersdorf and that side of things because they couldn't maintain a tight cordon. And they just didn't have enough troops to space it out as far as they wanted to, and being that tight up in there, they probably would have gotten their asses kicked. So they got their asses kicked anyway. And, I would not call this an overwhelming victory, but the casualties are telling. When you're talking about 50% more casualties, you're talking about a pretty serious change. And the French are going to hold the field, which means any guns or whatever that are left behind, we got this whole pile of eliminated guns and whatever. Well, some of them are restorable, and there may be some other equipment, et cetera, that's available. Stragglers will be harder for the Austrians to recover, probably, than for the French. Overall, Napoleon's got to be pretty happy, except for the fact that he got wounded on the first day, and badly enough that he could have died overnight. A lot of casualties across the board, and yeah, this is. I like this one. Maybe not as much as the Austerlitz. I gotta swap batteries. The armies are bigger than they are at Marengo. Marengo, I feel like I'm dealing with, little forces that are it's a map this size, and there's a lot less troops on the board. So it almost feels like you could run out and steal victory point locations and everything. It just doesn't. It doesn't develop in the same way. This felt like a real Napoleonic battle in a way that Marengo tends not to. Now, the other one I did, Montebello or whatever, I hate all that terrain. We're going to see more of it in Talavera. The 2 scenarios from that, I think, have terrain in them too, along with the print and play. So we shall see. That is not the next thing on the board, though, and so this one's going up.